Welcome to MojoTalks. I'm Justin. I'm joined by my colleague Chris, and this is Watch Club, where we talk about the newest episode of the biggest shows on TV week after week.
Every week.
Today we're talking about Legion. Season 2, Episode 1.
Groovy.
And we're going to start our discussion by just going over what actually happened in this episode.
That is a great question. For most shows, that wouldn't be a very relevant question, but with Legion, you're never quite sure what's going on, and that's one of the reasons that we love it.
Part of the charm, of course.
Part of the charm. So, okay, we find David. He's been missing for 1 year ever since that pod mysteriously took him away at the end of the last season. He's been missing for a year. He finally wakes up, and then there's just a lot of exposition in this episode, just like place setting, catching up to where we are, but it works because it's all revelation to David. He's the new kid in school,
introducing David to a lot of changes that have happened since we last saw our heroes, to use the parlance of television. It's been a while. And things have changed significantly.
Things have changed. Melanie's gang is now with Division 3. Melanie is depressed and addicted to vapor.
Which David, at one point early on, was also addicted to vapor. So that's a little symmetry right there.
Might come back to that a little later when we talk. But David can't remember anything of the last year. Now, Autonomy, he sees glimpses of his memory, but he can't quite pierce his shell. So he knows that there's something there, and he feels like David might be holding back. Everyone is suspicious of David, including Admiral Baskethead, the leader.
Admiral Fukuyama.
Yes, Admiral Fukuyama and the vocoder twins. So
great name for a band.
Yeah, the big question here is like, what happened to David? Where was he? How can he recover those memories? Carrie makes a sensory deprivation daiquiri tank to boost his signal, I guess. And David finally recovers some memories. What he finds is that Sid from the future told him that he needs to help Farouk, the Shadow King, find his body, which we are told will make him all-powerful and possibly end the world.
Kind of the opposite of what everyone had been saying for the entirety of the episode.
Right.
We got to prevent it, and then Sid shows up from the future to say, no, in fact, we have to instigate that happening.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a curveball at the end of the episode there. There's also a dance-off in possibly the astral plane, possibly the real world.
Not exactly clear.
Not exactly clear. That's kind of like where that photo comes from. Between David and Lenny and Oliver, David seems to win, but I'm not sure exactly what that did. Did it impede the search for Farouk's body? Did it help them? It seemed like he kind of banished them out of the club. So look, there's still so many questions to answer. But all in all, I felt like this was a really strong episode, and special bonus to this episode, I feel like a person could almost jump into the series at this episode and not be too lost.
And, that speaks a little bit to Noah Hawley, the creator of the show. His claim to fame is that he produced and wrote Fargo, which, as we know, every season is a new self-contained story. So I think part of it is kind of building off that place setting of a new season. It doesn't seem like he's someone who wants to develop these chapters of his story as one long thing. He likes to have an opportunity to, in a new season, introduce new elements visually and from a story perspective. And it's a great jumping in point, you're right.
Yep. And you can see, like, visually, there's a lot going on visually. And there's a lot of, like, world building. Like, I'm not sure if it's place setting, like a lot of details will become clearer and they'll make sense. Like, why do we see the vocoder twins behind these magnifying glasses?
Why are there weird perspective photographs in their office? Is that what we would call it? Their office?
That was like a conference room?
Yeah, that's a weird place to work, man. With the lunchroom with a big boat that brings you your waffles in the morning. I mean, I don't get waffles in the morning at all, so a boat bringing them to me would be excellent, but I just feel like there's better ways to deliver your food to your patrons. It's a weird, weird place, but it also kind of fits with the world of Legion.
It does fit with the world of Legion, and I think it gives us the opportunity to be a bit more in David's mindset. And I think that's part of the reason this episode works so well, is because we're really in his mindset of like, there's so much new stimuli here, so much has changed, and I just gotta go along with it. I just gotta absorb it all.
Okay, well, I've been someplace else and now I'm here.
And Dan Stevens plays it so well, that scene with Admiral Baskethead and the vocoder twins, where he's just taking it in. Like, okay, you're singing to me from behind these magnifying glasses, and you're a machine that bleeds. Don't know what that means.
Great quote. Not sure what it means, but I thought about that for a while. We are the machine that bleeds. That's like some poetic stuff right there.
I think that we're going to see a lot more of Admiral Fukuyama, and there's going to be a lot explained there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying it's a race? We're in a race.
Here's the thing. I feel like, and this doesn't bother me in the least, but I feel like a person could draw a lot of parallels between the visual style of the show, particularly this episode, and maybe the rest of the season, we'll see, but a lot of parallels between the style of this show and Wes Anderson's visual style.
Yeah, we were talking a bit about, in the intro, we have those, those cards that read like information, tactical.
When they're introducing the different sections of Division 3.
Right, and it's almost like a very Rushmore-y introduction, like to, in that movie, we see all the activities that the main character is a part of in a very similar way. We see them like visually, but we're also reminded with like some text of like, this is information, this is... So that was a really cool element, and it brought us up to speed very quickly.
Yeah, sure.
The posing was really funny too. It was great. That was great stuff.
It was beautiful. And we also had another sort of Wes Anderson-ish element was John Hamm doing narration to introduce like sections of the story.
Yeah, weird anthology stories that kind of loosely tie to what the episode is about.
Suddenly he awoke, and he was Xuanzhu again. But in that moment he didn't know. Was he Xuanzhu who had dreamt he was a butterfly? Or a butterfly who was dreaming he was Xuanzhu?
Supposedly this is going to be something that recurs throughout the season. John Hamm will be returning. It's maybe not for every episode, but there will be more John Hamm if that's what you're into. And those stories were really interesting and weird, and the one that really stuck with me was the man sawing his leg off, which you noticed an interesting detail later on.
Okay, here, I'm going to play a little game with you here. I feel like some of the visuals and little details are so random that you could almost like be really imaginative and make some up. So here, I'm going to give you 3 visual details from the show.
Great.
Tell me which one I made up.
This is going to be tough.
So, a legless pig man, a glass eye and aspic, or a psychic cephalopod?
Ooh, I'm going to go with the cephalopod. Did you make that up?
I did not make that up.
Damn. See, yeah, that's tough because this show will just throw absurdity at you like relentlessly. And I feel like you could come at me with pretty much anything and be like, yeah, you didn't see the giant pink elephant that was in the background? No, I totally missed it. It's just, there's just so many visual details to pick up on that it's really easy to miss one while you're staring at another.
Yep. The cephalopod, so here's one that I actually like freeze framed on.
Please.
Was when you're first seeing Division 3, they show some wanted posters when they talk about how Oliver is wanted by Division 3. You see Oliver, you see someone in a gas mask with the name Der Ersticker, which I haven't looked up. I meant to look up. I imagine it's German for something. Some dude that is Luis something. I couldn't quite see the last name. And then another big poster of this big red squid, and says cephalopod HR14C.
It must be dangerous. You don't want to mess with that cephalopod.
Well, yeah, like it's gonna be dangerous somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how, but if it's on Division 3's radar,
Yeah,
that's
and I assumed it was psychic, but
probably, yeah.
I mean, what other powers could it have that is a threat? Like,
We'll have to wait and see.
oh man.
Yeah, so the other thing that's really interesting about this season is that it completely introduces a new setting. The Division 3 headquarters, like we've said, is totally new to us, and that kind of opens them up to introducing new visual elements. And like in most shows, that would be disorienting. And it is kind of disorienting at first, but the way that we're kind of used to having the rug ripped out from under us in this show, I feel like we're more open to new locations, new characters, because we know that like everything happens at a mile a minute. So what do you think about the new setting and how it relates to like the world building in this show?
I think it's amazing. It's Division 3 is just so rich and weird, and everything that you expect a government agency to not be.
Correct. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Which is wonderful, because like this whole, like, I've had enough of the trope of like mutant kids being kept in this sterile clinic, and that drives them crazy. Like, I think I'll credit Noah Hawley for making the decision to like have these outlandish settings. But one thing that Fargo has in common with Legion is like all the characters, they're always searching for what the truth is, right? They're always trying to figure out the surroundings, and that is largely the journey that we're on with them. But whereas in Fargo, it's very grounded in a place. I mean, it's right there in the title, right? Fargo, but you're always aware, like, okay, now they're leaving the main road and going into a secluded area. Now they're at the farmhouse, they're at the butcher shop, they're in the city now. Like, you know exactly where you are, and it's always the real world. In Legion, it's like you're never in the real world.
Right.
It never feels like a world that you recognize, that you've been to before. It's always somehow surreal.
And also, reading is not normal. Beware of ideas that are not your own.
Settling in?
Which is a really neat trick to pull off. I think the danger there is that it might feel like you might just check out, like, this isn't fake. This is all just like...
This is taking place in the guy's mind. Who cares? Or in the astral... What is an astral, location? How can you be... I could see this being something that pushes people away from the show, but yet at the same time, the show's very inviting in the way that it's like willing to sit down and explain a lot of these things to you, if sometimes clumsily and in a lot of exposition, but at the same time, it's always fascinating. So I don't really mind.
This is a bad idea. Just open your mind. Open my mind, right.
Oh, we haven't even talked about the catalyst. This new catalyst virus.
Right.
Or whatever. We don't know who it is. Maybe it's caused by Farouk. Maybe not.
Could be not.
Maybe it's something else following him.
It's totally terrifying, though. The sound design of the clattering.
People
of
standing there like statues, their teeth chattering.
That sound is like piercing. It's really something else. I've never quite seen anything like it.
Oh, one thing I want a point I want to make about Wes Anderson is, do you think it will get like too much? Do you think it'll ever reach a point where it's like, come on, just like stop trying to be Wes Anderson?
I feel like there's enough spin on it, and like, to be honest with you, I didn't notice it until you brought it up. But I feel like there's enough of a unique spin on it, especially considering the subject matter and the way that it's like episodic and handled in a kind of piecemeal approach to storytelling. I feel like those visual flourishes are always welcome on television, right? It's not, I mean, you see it more and more these days where these TV shows will play with traditionally, cinematic elements, but even in the way that the show changes aspect ratios in the middle of scenes, it's so interesting and bizarre, and I'm always looking for new ways for TV to push out of its traditional box, and this show just constantly is doing that, just all the time is pushing the envelope.
Well, you guys heard it here. We're gonna cut off anyone down the road this season who's like, stop with the Wes Anderson stuff, or backlashing against that.
We're here for that.
we're here for that. We're all about it.
Yeah.
All right, in. That's in.
I don't understand how.
I'm so sorry about that.
Okay, so look, predictions. Who is the vessel? Who will Farouk be controlling?
That's really interesting. Because as much as I love seeing Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords in a villain role, which is fascinating to me, I feel like setting him up early in the season as Oliver, we're bound to see Farouk jump bodies yet again. And I think the primary candidate would be one of the members of the group that we saw last season, someone close to the main cast. Who do you think it'll be?
I mean, I think what they've done is they've set up the possibility for it to be anyone, right? Because I feel like Melanie's addicted to vapor, so she's weak. Maybe vapor even makes him more susceptible. Maybe that's why Lenny was pushing David into that addiction.
Yes.
So that he could, more easily
manipulate the mind. I think that's a prime candidate, but like there are plenty of others. Yeah.
But then, like Sid has been shown to, I mean, like she tried to at the end of last season too, kind of like work against the group, and like she's part of the reason that Farouk even got out into. She's the reason that Farouk got out into the world.
Right.
She was the one that like, no, David can't die. I gotta save him. I'm gonna mess this thing up. Farouk is out in the world.
Now armed with a compass that is constantly pointing towards David, that would come in handy for Farouk. I mean, that would also be the most heartbreaking possession, I think, for David if he had to face. Wow, that's tough.
True.
Regardless of what ends up happening, I'm just happy to be back in the world of Legion and back in Noah Hawley's twisted mind.
And I'm excited to be coming here to talk about it every week.
Every single week. So that does it for today's episode of the Watch Club. Be sure to subscribe to MojoTalks and hit that bell for notifications every time we publish a new video. And come back next week for more Legion talk on the Watch Club. And that's it for me and Chris. See you next time.
See you next time.